Hey guys, hey, this is Anne Marie, the Anti-HR channel, and I wanted to share a little story time with you guys because I haven't done a story time in a minute, and I think it's time for another story time. This story time was inspired by an amazing client that I have right now. She and I are working through a discriminatory hostile work environment situation, and her employer just offered a separation agreement, so we're working through developing a counter and so on. But she's really an incredibly impressive young lady, and we were having a conversation, and I was telling her this story, and so I thought I would tell it to you guys because I think it has a lot of lessons in it, and it's from my life, of course. So back when I was about 26, 27 years old, I was working as probably about 20, more like 24, 25, but I was working as an executive assistant to the president and CEO of a very well-known not-for-profit organization in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I had been hired to be this person's executive assistant, and I think my starting salary was somewhere around $26,000 or $27,000. And this was in the 90s, y'all. So it's many years later. And at the time, every job that I got was more money than the other job I had. So before that, I was a legal assistant, and I was probably making like 25, 26. And I think I went to this place and I was making like 27 or 28 or something like that. And so, I thought it was a lot of money. I was making enough money to pay my rent because, my rent was $620, including utilities. This was before all the crazy stuff that's going on in DC now. I actually saw the building and a unit very similar to the one that I lived in sold for, I want to say, over $300,000 or $400,000 a couple of years ago in DC. Exact place that I was paying $620. But anyway, I digress. So I was working as an executive assistant for this president and CEO. And from the very beginning, from the beginning of my employment there, I had very concerning interactions with several of the white women who were reporting to the president. There was one in particular who would come in and just lean over my desk, pick up a notepad off my desk, take a pen off my desk without asking me. And I finally had to ask her to not touch anything on my desk without asking me first. And then she got an attitude, right? Because she would just come and just pick things. She would also just walk into my boss's office without speaking, and I had to let her know not to go into my boss's office without making sure that she was available, and to make sure she was available, she needed to clear it with me. So it was just a lot of disrespectful things that some of them would do, and I would have to check them. So of course it was all the communication and she's mean and blah, 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 feedback that they would give about me. But that's not what this is about. This is about knowing your worth and knowing who you are, even when other people don't. Believing that you are who you know you are and who you think you are before other people do. And this is how I learned that lesson. So I'm working at this place. I'm the executive assistant. I'm responsible for my boss's calendar and organizing meetings and helping her to manage the board of directors meetings. And over time, I basically took over the agenda. I would take the minutes, I would generate the minutes, I would be able to tell her what they needed to take up at the next meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So I became very well versed in not just the rules that boards have to operate under, but how to run board meetings, which would benefit me later. But in addition to that, this place had a lot of turnover because it wasn't well managed. And at a certain time of the year, when they needed to balance their books, they would fire people, lay people off, and so on, just to balance their books. Then when their new funding would come in, they would rehire people. They were just not a well-run organization. This is literally how they were managing the organization. And they had a constant revolving door of HR directors. They could never seem to keep an HR director. And now, after having worked in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years, I understand now better than I did then why there was that kind of turnover, because it's nonprofits are particularly hard to do HR in because they're always under-resourced. People don't want to follow the rules. They think because they're doing good, they should be able to do whatever they want. It's a lot of problems. But they were constantly going through HR people. So at a certain point, they fired like the entire HR team, the HR director, and the person that was working with her. And they hired a consultant. And the consultant, after a couple of weeks said that she needed help. So I got volunteered or voluntold to help the consultant with administrative aspects of doing the HR stuff, even though I had no experience with HR. This is kind of how I got into HR story as well. I had no experience with HR, but the lady was like, she had interacted with me. She took a liking to me, and I liked her too. I don't remember her name, but I can still see her face in my head. And she told my boss, I think Anne-Marie is really smart and I can teach her what she needs to do. And so I don't think, if she's interested in doing it, you should not hire another person right now. Let me try to sort out the problems in the HR office, because there was a lot of filing issues, record keeping issues, and so on. So I worked with this lady to get the records together, first of all, get files, make sure every employee had a file, make sure certain things were in the files for every employee. This company had an administrative office, but it also ran clinics and staffed clinics. So we hired medical personnel, we hired lay people, we hired nurses, nurse practitioners. So you had to make sure also that your records were in compliance with the local and federal rules and so on for the kinds of things that they were doing, right? So this lady taught me a whole lot. She taught me the importance of the details. I learned how to write letters of hire, write letters of termination, write changes in pay, and so on. And I remember one time I made a mistake. This is how I learned. I made a mistake and I miscalculated, or I didn't miscalculate, but I misstated a person's salary in their letter of hire, and it turned into a big issue because the person was supposed to be hourly, and I had put an annual rate in there, and then the person was trying to say they were supposed to make the annual rate when really they were only supposed to be paid based on how many hours they worked. So I learned a big lesson from that. And one of the things that was great about it is that the consultant didn't make a big deal out of it. She just was like, this is why it's important. She sat the girl down and explained to her that she would get a new letter of hire, but she wasn't going to be making all that money that she thought she was going to be making. And that's how I learned how important it was to make sure that your calculations of people pay was correct, and that how you wrote things down in letters and in files mattered. So I was working and doing this job for probably almost 2 years. In addition to my other responsibilities, I was doing this for almost 2 years. And at the same time, had also got accepted to law school. So I was going to law school at night. I was 2 days a week. I was working, coming in extra hours because my boss allowed me to come in earlier in the day so that I could leave to do a internship at another nonprofit. She was friends with, somebody on the board was friends with the person, and they helped me get an internship because I was required to do an internship. And because I had a full-time job, I couldn't just go do an internship like other law students do during the day. I was a night student, so I had to get creative about getting an internship and filling that requirement. I was able to do an internship at this organization over the summer. So I was doing all of this stuff at the same time. When I think about it now, I don't know how I did it, but I did it because you know how we do. I made it happen, and I did a good job in all of them. So I'm doing both jobs. Salary reviews come around. I expressed to the consultant that I feel like I should get a salary bump that takes into consideration the fact that I am doing all this extra work, right? And I went and I did research, and I felt like I should have gotten a salary increase. And by that time, I was making probably like 28 something, close to 29,000. But I had done my research, and I knew that people doing the kind of work that I was making were in the 30s at that time, at least in the 30s, right? So I went to my boss and I made a case, and I found out later the consultant also went to my boss and made a case for that she felt that I should be promoted. They were now recruiting to hire an HR person, and she felt that I should be promoted, not to be the HR director, of course, I wasn't qualified for that, but to do like the coordinator type work and get a salary that indicated that I was doing both the executive assistant work and that. And my boss refused to give me the title. and she only gave me, I think, a $2,000 or $2,500 raise. So I went from like maybe 28 or 29,000 to about 31 or 32. And I was pissed because I felt like I'm doing all of this work and I'm doing it well. You give me reviews. You're saying I'm doing a good job. Of course, you keep criticizing my communication style because the white women don't like that I won't let them disrespect me. But that being said, I'm doing a good job and you only gave me 2,000 measly dollars. Meanwhile, I'm working in HR. So now I'm privy to how much everybody in the organization is making. I know how much everyone makes, from the president to all of the directors, the vice presidents, everybody. I know how much everybody makes. So, and I know how much the consultant is being paid too, 6 figures. So I'm pissed. But, she basically was like, well, you're still the executive assistant and you still have to do those things. And basically she didn't want me to leave my job because she liked all the things that I did for her. And she couldn't see me as being anything more than her executive assistant. So while, I'm filling in these gaps and doing all this extra work to keep everything working properly, in addition to all the things I'm doing for the board, etc., she refused to give me the recognition. And the recognition is not somebody patting you on the head and saying, good job. When somebody really appreciates how you're doing your job, they pay you. Always remember that. Certificates, days off, calling out your name in the boardroom, that's all well and good. When somebody really appreciates how you do your job, they will promote you. They will give you bonuses. You will get ends and dividends. And if you are not getting those things, those people don't really recognize you and appreciate you. Remember that I said that. So, I am my mother's daughter. So I just basically was like, okay, I've now been at this organization for almost 4 years. And I'm in law school. So I kind of wanted to stay there because I had some flexibility with my calendar, with my schedule. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to find me another job because I'm doing all this work. And at this point, I'm doing at least manager level work. So I shouldn't have to still be an executive assistant. I want more because I know that I can do more. And therefore, I should be paid more because I am doing more. I should be paid more. Right? And they were recruiting to hire a director of HR and administration or something like that. And so I'm perusing the Washington Post, because back then jobs were all in the, posted in the classifieds, the help wanted ads in the newspaper. It wasn't online. There was no online yet. Okay. And I saw a position for director of administration and board operations at a organization, a well-known organization. And I thought to myself at first, I know I can do the board operations part. And it had a lot of HR responsibility, but it had finance in it too. And that made me nervous because I don't like math. Let me just say, I don't like math. I've never liked it. Great analytical thinker, very strategic, very organized, but I do not like math. I've never liked it since I was a kid. And so I was thinking, I don't think I want to be responsible for budgets and things like that. And that was in the job. But I kept reading the job over and over again. And I thought to myself, what do I have to lose if I apply for this job? Let me just go ahead and apply for this job. So, I updated my resume, put all the things that I was doing and all the board, things that I was doing, because part of the job was administration, which was dealing with HR stuff inside of the department. And then the other part was managing the board, that this department had a board assigned as a part of it. And the person had to be able to interact with the board, manage the board, make sure the board agendas were done, things like that were in the job announcement. So I went ahead and applied for the job. A couple weeks later, I get called. I get asked to come in for an interview. I go in, and the person interviewing me is a Black man, Black American man, older gentleman. He's basically the head of the entire department. It was a department, but it was a big department, and turned out to be the smallest of the departments in the organization. But it was a massive department and had over 100 people working in there. Right? Well, not massive, but it was big. And the organization itself had thousands of people, but this department had a couple hundred people working there. So he, explained the job. He interviewed me, and one of the things he said to me was, if you get hired in this job, it's not an executive assistant job. This is a director job. You will have an assistant. You will have people reporting to you. Do you feel comfortable doing that? I explained to him that by the time I was applying for this job, both of the receptionists were reporting to me. So I had learned to be a supervisor. And both of them were women who were older than me. And I had learned to be a supervisor and how to manage people and things and hire people and things like that. And fire in that job, an executive assistant job. I'd also hired interns, things like that. So he was like, okay. Didn't hear anything back from him for a bit. Then he called me back, asked me to come back in to meet the entire senior management team. I went in, met them. That's a whole nother story in and of itself, but I'll save that for another video, that whole experience. Because if you're paying attention, you can figure out all the drama and chaos you might be walking into when you have some of these interviews, right? But anyway, he had me meet them, and then he called me back and told me that he wanted to hire me for the job. And so I accepted. He asked me to come back because he wanted me to come to, they had a convention, big convention meetings that they would have, and they were having it in Washington, D.C. that year. And he wanted me to come. No, it wasn't convention. It was another meeting. But anyway, he wanted me to come before I started. He wanted me to come to the meeting because he wanted me to meet people on the board. So he asked me if I would be willing to come in on a Friday or Saturday, even though I had a job. I called in sick and went and met with the board and so on. Made me an offer. And the job offer was, I think it was like $42,000, right? And I was so excited, y'all. I'm going from 32 to 42. I'm rich, right? And I'm all happy. I'm more happy about the money, the $10,000 bump I'm going to get, than, the title itself. But I always remember when I went in to give my notice to the president of the other organization where I was working, and I told her, I have accepted a job as a director of administration and board operations at, I didn't tell her where I was going, but I told her what title I was going into, right? I learned even before then not to tell people all your business. So I didn't tell them where I was going. I just said I had been offered a job as a director of administration and board operations, and I had accepted it at a major membership association, I told her. And you should have seen her face turn red. White woman, of course. Her face turned red. Then she teared up and talked about how she was so proud of me and blah, blah, blah. Almost like taking credit for me getting this job when really she didn't have no right to take credit for any of that, frankly. And, I just was kind of like, because by that time I was so over that woman after she had told me that basically I was just an executive assistant doing HR stuff. And so I didn't need to get that big of a salary raise. I never said anything to her, but I never forgot what she said to me, right? And I was really angry about it. But I did my job, kept my mouth shut, and started looking for another job. And I remember telling the consultant, and she was just so happy, and she was like, I knew that you were going to leave here and go on to bigger things. I'm so happy for you. This is just the beginning for you. She was wonderful. And I also remember, several of the other women. I still am very good friends with several of the women I met at that organization, as some of my lifelong girlfriends. And we all celebrated when I had drinks, did all that stuff. And we all talked about the fact that heifer wouldn't give me a director job, and now I'm going somewhere. Wouldn't give me a manager job, and now I was going to go somewhere and be a director, right? So I go to this other organization, and I'm making my $42,000, and I think I'm rich. But then part of my job was to do the budgets, and I had to learn to do budgets. I taught myself. I asked people questions. I figured it out. I never made my boss explain anything to me. If I didn't know how to do something, I would go find somebody to show me how to do it, or I would if I had to sit there up until 11, 12 o'clock at night sometimes, I would stay and I would read and I would figure things out. And that's what I did. I learned how to do the budgets, but part of doing the budgets was looking at all the personnel records and seeing how much everybody else was making. Because I was basically the point person for HR things for the department. So if we were hiring people, firing people, dealing with personnel issues, raises, it was me. Dealing with finance to put together our annual budget every year, it was me. And I always remember my boss gave me the stuff, told me what I needed to do. Didn't tell me how, told me what I needed to do, and then told me I had to go to a meeting with him to the CFO's office and present the budget. And he was just like, do you need me to help you with this? And I was like, no, I'm going to figure it out. And I did. And I remember how proud he was when he sat there and I presented the budget. And afterwards, he was like, I wasn't sure that you were going to be ready to do that by yourself, but you did it. He said, I just sat there and I didn't have to say anything because you had figured it out. I had made notes. I had index cards. I was ready, right? But anyway, so I'm looking at these personnel sheets and I'm seeing how much all my other counterpart directors are, because it's me and about at least 5 or 6 other directors in this department. And I realized that there's at least a 20 of 10, not 15, 10, at least between $15,000 and $20,000 difference between me and the next director. So even though I had gotten a $10,000 raise and I was so excited about it and I thought I was rich, I never negotiated. I didn't ask for anything. I just took the first offer they offered me, and they got me for quite cheap. And when I saw the spreadsheet with how much everybody else was making, I was very upset. You know what I'm saying? I was very upset. And I went to my boss and I said something to him about it. And he told me, and he pointed out that I had not, negotiated, but he told me not to worry about it, that he would take care of me, right? And during the next year, the whole organization went through a, what they call, reviewed all the salaries and they updated their ranges and stuff. And I got a raise off of that because my salary was so low that it was outside of even the lowest director range when they did the review. So I got a raise, right? And then at the end of that year, my boss gave me a bigger raise. So I ended up being within $10,000 difference instead of 20. But the thing is that I never caught up. As I said before, when you don't negotiate, I never caught up with the other people. And I mean, they had been there longer than me. They had worked there long. Most of them were, had been there for years and years. I left that place and many of them were still there. Some of them died still working there. It was that kind of place. So, but the takeaway is I didn't understand to ask for what I wanted. And more importantly, I had worked for a person who refused to see me for who I was and what I could be. And so it undermined my confidence in myself. And so it didn't even occur to me that even though they offered me $10,000 more than I was making, and it didn't even occur to me that I should ask for more, right? I learned later that I should have asked for more and I would have gotten it if I had asked for more. And the company itself realized that they were underpaying me and gave me a raise. And then my boss, when I said to him, my salary is so much lower than all the other people and I do just as much work as all the other people, he was like, you're right, and gave me a significant bump, right, to try to get me closer to where everybody else was. But I never quite caught up with everybody else because every year they were getting raises too. I'm getting raises, but they're getting raises too, right? And so that was something I learned. But the thing that I never forgot was that conversation I had with my previous boss where I was making the case for why I should be given a different title and more pay, and she refused to give it to me. And basically told me I was just an executive assistant doing HR things, but that I didn't need to have a different title or to make more money. And what was interesting is that after I left, they hired another HR person and who was a hot mess. And one of my friends, who was a former colleague and is still a friend and mentor to this day, said to me that she told the president, you could have just given Anne Marie this job. She was doing it. She was doing a good job. There weren't all these problems when she was here. People's files wasn't getting lost and all these problems weren't happening. You could have just given her this job, right? but she refused to do it. And so the thing is that you got to understand that sometimes people will never see you and see your talent, and you have to leave to go somewhere else where people will. But you got to believe and know who you are, and believe that you are who you think you are, so that when you're leaving, even though you might be leaving to a better situation, always remember to go after what you believe you are due, right? Don't just be happy for the little job. Ask for, always negotiate. I've told you guys this before. Always negotiate. But more importantly, believe that you are who you know you are. And don't let anybody try to make you play small. Don't let anybody make you feel small, right? Because that's what she did in a sense. She made me feel small. And so I was just so happy to get a job offer and to leave. I was so happy that somebody would give me a director title and a $10,000 bump that I didn't think, you know what, you deserve to make even more money than this. You should ask for more money, right? Just getting the job was enough, and that shouldn't be enough for you. It shouldn't have been enough for me, and it shouldn't be enough for you either. So it's really important to believe who you are. Believe in who you are. Know who you are and believe in who you are. And no matter how other people treat you or what they say to you, you got to know who you are. And if you're in a situation with people who refuse to see you for who you are and see your abilities and your talents, there is always going to be somebody else or another company who will be willing to see you and to pay you. So it's your responsibility to go out and find them people, right? And also remember, as I said before, that those talents are talents that you can also sell on the open market for yourself also, right? Enough of us don't always think as entrepreneurially as we should, especially now. And so it's also important to realize that you might have to create your own opportunity nowadays, but always know that there is another opportunity out there, even if you're in a situation where you're not getting the opportunity that you deserve, right? So you have to go out and find that opportunity. But just because somebody refuses to see you for who you are, doesn't mean that you shouldn't see you for who you are. And I'm going to tell you the last thing before I stop here. The same woman who refused to give me that raise, many years later, reached out to me. I think it was on LinkedIn or somewhere. We ended up having lunch. And, and I reminded her of what had happened because, I'm going to talk about stuff because I don't care. And she apologized to me and said that she was wrong and that she should have given me the opportunity that I asked for, and, how impressed she was, because by this time I'm a vice president. I'm doing other things. She's much older than me. She's like 20 something years older than me. And she actually ended up referring me, being a referral and a reference for a job that I was applying for. I later called her because I knew she knew the person, and she encouraged me to apply for the job. I did. That was a job I stayed at for less than 6 months because the woman was the handmaiden of the devil. But she and the handmaiden of the devil was friends. They knew each other. They weren't close friends, but they knew each other professionally. And so she called the lady and basically told her, you won't find anybody better than Anne Marie. And I was hired, but I had to get the hell away from that woman because she was the handmaiden of the devil. But it was funny to me all those years later, 15, 20 years later, talking to her. And I'm now a vice president, and she's so impressed. And I kind of pointed out to her, I'm the same person I was then, and you just didn't want to see it. You couldn't see it. But I'm not a different person. I'm the same person I was then, when you wouldn't give me that opportunity that I deserved, and that I had to leave to get the opportunity that I needed. But you couldn't see me for who I was. And I'm not a different person now. I'm the same person I was then. And I basically said that to her. So, and she acknowledged that she had made, to her credit, she acknowledged that she should have made a different decision. But the thing is that I want you to remember, people don't have to see you for who you are. You have to see you, right? You have to know who you are. You have to believe in who you know yourself to be, even when other people haven't caught up yet. You have to know it. And that's what I learned from that lesson. At the time, I didn't know it, but going through that experience, and especially working under someone who understood me, who supported me, who allowed me to grow. I worked for that gentleman for 8 years, and it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. He's still one of the most important people in my life to this day. because he allowed me to be me. And he allowed me to learn things, do things, make mistakes, all the things that you need to do to be able to be a good leader. And I wouldn't have gotten those lessons if I had stayed in the other place, right? So always remember that the person who has to know you and see you for who you are, the most important person to know you and see you for who you are is you. Other people may catch up or may not. But it's important that you know what you deserve and that you be willing to go after it. So I hope that this story time was helpful. I hope you took away some lessons from it. If you enjoyed it, let me know. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button, share it with a friend, and comment, but comment constructively. I hope you enjoyed this story time, and I thank you guys always for supporting this channel, supporting my work. If you would like to support my work, there are lots of ways that you can do it. You can buy me a coffee, which is linked in my description. You can do a super chat. You could buy a t-shirt. People always ask me what they can do. You could buy a t-shirt. You can buy a ebook. Right now I'm running a special. It's my birthday. My birthday's next week, actually. I'm running a sale for my birthday where you can grab access to my most popular product, which is the Roadmap to Understanding Your Workplace Rights. And when you purchase that, you will get the Anti-HR Documentation Journal 50% off. Just use the code BIRTHDAY. The other thing I want to make sure I mention that I am doing this month for my birthday is my Anti-HR Master Course Bundle, which is already discounted, is going to be an additional 10% off. Use the code GETFREE10. And that is the course that people go online all the time, download, and use it to identify discrimination, confirm discrimination, document it, and then request separation with severance. I just had someone email me last week to let me know that they had bought the course and they now had just gotten an offer of a negotiated separation with severance from the employer, which they were then working on negotiating. So sometimes people can't afford to work with me one-to-one. So I always like people to have the option of downloading that master course, because in it, I teach people the same things that I do with my one-to-one clients, right? So that is on sale this month as well. So if you are a person that is dealing with what you believe is discrimination in your workplace, you may be able to get your employer to pay you to leave that job, but you got to know how to ask. And you have to know how to negotiate whatever they do offer you to make sure you don't get lowballed or screwed over. Because sometimes employers, they know they're not right. And when you ask to leave, they will happily give you an offer. I had a client the other day who, the minute she asked for it, before she barely got back to her desk, they had agreed to give it to her because they knew they were wrong. But they will also try to lowball you. So what I try to teach people is not just how to get them to offer you the money, but how to make sure you get the right amount and you get what is fair based on what you have experienced in the workplace. So that Master Course Bundle is on sale this month, and it is already marked down 20%, and I'm offering you an additional 10% off with the code GETFREE10. So I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you find the resources that I offer helpful, including the information that I give you in these videos. If you do, please make sure you give this video a like, subscribe. I mean, you're here, so you might as well subscribe, and comment, but do so constructively. As always, I'm Anne Marie, and this is the Anti-HR channel. HR is not your enemy, but they are definitely not your friend. But I am. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.